Hello YouTube, my name is Randall. I'm 63 years old and I've got a story to tell you if you'll give me a few minutes of your time. And at the end of this story I want to pose a question to see if anyone has a viable answer to or a solution. I mean, have you ever had dreams, hopes, accomplishing something in life, have your dreams destroyed or anything like that? Well, there's people in life out here that have no dreams at all. They just live from day to day and go on through life. You know, it's really a shame. Then there's people that have had dreams of what they want to do, and for some reason or another, all they do is talk about it. They never even try. Then there's people that have actually tried, and for some reason or another, they give up, you know, or they get discouraged and they just quit. Then there's those that have this lifelong dream of something that they want to accomplish in life. They work hard at it and even try, you know, every way they possibly can to make it become a reality. My dream was to design and build my own home. And back after my wife and I got married, you know, we were talking about being a homeowner and everything, and that was many, many years ago. But all in all, you know, she would bring home the house plan books and she'd get at the grocery store and she'd go through them, look at different house plans. This went on for a few years, and you know, then she finally came up, you know, and she goes, out of all of these plans, she said, I've got 3 of them, but I don't know really what I like the most. And I said, well, why don't you just circle the things that you like about these 3 house plans? And I said, get back with me. So she did, and I took all 3 of those sketches, you know, those that she liked, and I sketched out, you know, a layout for the floor plan, and then did a sketch, you know, of what the front would look like, and she liked it. So I went out and I built me a drafting table, bought a parallel bar, bought full 24 by 36 blueprint sheets, vellum, onion paper, whatever you call it, and I drew a complete set of detailed house plans. Well, she was still in agreement with it. She liked it, and so then I had blueprints made off of that, and from there I did a materials list. Got my cost for the materials and everything, and calculated out, you know, what it was going to take to build it, because I planned on doing this, you know, myself, with help from some friends, of course, too. So we go to our local bank, talk to them, and he looks at it. He sits down, you know, calculates out, you know, what we made. He said, well, he said, yeah, you qualify for this. So we started filling out the paperwork. Well, about halfway through the paperwork, he was looking at the house plans, and he looks and says, how many square feet is this? We told him. He goes to his calculator and starts calculating up, and he goes, you can't build that house for what you're wanting to borrow. I said, yeah, I can. And he said, no, you can't. I said, I've got the complete materials list. I said, which are good for 30 days, plus I've got a 10% cost overrun in there too. And he goes, no, you don't understand. It costs X number of dollars at that time, I forgot what it was, per square foot to build a house. He says, if you walk away from that house, he said, and it's not complete, there won't be enough money in there to, you know, have a contractor come in and finish it. And I said, you mean, I said, I'm here to tell you that a lifelong dream like this, I said, there's no way I'm going to walk away from it. And he said, well, if that happens. And I said, okay then. I said, it's for argument's sake. I said, let's borrow what you say it's going to take, because I'm never going to use it anyway. So he comes back and he goes, you don't qualify for that. And I thought, there's got to be some way. So we left there with our tail between our legs. Of course, the company that I worked for, you know, it was a service organization that we serviced bank equipment. So I knew, you know, a lot of bankers. I thought, man, no problem, I'll just go somewhere else. Well, the majority of them that I talked to, you know, they said, yeah, we could do it, but you're not a licensed contractor. And if you want to get a licensed contractor, then get away, B. Really? Okay, I have to edit that out. But, you know, if you want to get a licensed contractor, you know, then everything, you know, we can do it from there. And I said, why should I borrow the money to pay a contractor what I already know how to do? I mean, Yeah, I'm not a contractor, by trade or anything like that, but I've worked in the construction trade before. Uh, my first wife's dad was a brick mason. I worked with him, learned how to do all of that. Licensed electrician, certified HVAC, bachelor's degree in electronic engineering. So I felt very confident that yes, I could do this. Well, it was, I guess, close to almost a year. And then I happened to be in one of the locations that we serviced, and I knew the president of that bank, and he come walking through the lobby, said hi to me, and I said hi back, and of course then he walks over, he goes, "You don't sound the normal jovial self that you usually are." And he said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing." So he kept prying and kept prying and kept prying, and then he finally, I told him what the deal was. He said, "I'd like to see what you've drawn up." He said, "Have you got those plans with you?" And I said, "Yes, sir, they're out in the truck." He said, "Bring them in here and let me look at them." So I brought them in, I had my materials list, had my letter of qualifications, showing what I knew how to do. And he looked over them, he goes, "This is a good looking house." He said, "And you drew this?" I said, "Yes, sir, I did, everything." And he said, "What, were you an architect before you went to work for them?" And I said, "No, sir." I said, "Back in the day," I said, "in school," I said, "I did take drafting." And I said, "And I've been artistic all my life." And I said, "It's just something that stuck with me and that I enjoy doing." So he looked it over and he goes, "If I give you a construction loan, do you promise to come back and pay on the interest every 90 days for the amount of money that you've used?" And I said, "Absolutely." He says, "And at the end of this," he said, "when the house is completed, you promise to come back to me and turn it over to permanent financing." I said, "That would be the only right thing to do." He goes, "I'm going to give you that loan." You thought that that I had won the lottery. I was so tickled and so ecstatic. Of course, and I told him, I said, "Look," I said, "I'm going to have to fight for vacation time. I'm going to work on it every day when I get off from work, every weekend, weather permitting." And I said, "It may take me, a year or two to build it." He goes, "I don't care if it takes you 3 years to build it." He said, "Because technically I'll be making more money off of you from you paying on the interest." He said, "I don't have any problems with that." I thought, great. So started into building it. Everything was going great. We got into, it was about 18 months into the construction. And of course the company I was working for, I happened to go back over to that bank, to do some service work. And they've been bought out by a big bank. And of course the CEO, he was no longer the CEO of the bank. And it's all new people in there. And I thought, well, I better go check. Maybe their plans are a little bit different. So talked to the manager there at that location, told him what was going on. I said, "Is there anything different as far as, what I need to do when I come in, to pay all my interest?" He pulls it up. He goes, "We're not going to renew it when it comes up." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Our policy is a maximum of, what was it, 6 months, I think, something like that." He said, "For construction." And he said, "This will be 18 months. He said, "That's far beyond what we will allow." And I said, "Well, what's going to happen?" He goes, "We'll foreclose." I mean, very, cold. And I looked at him and I said, "This has been a lifelong dream of mine to build this house. Like hell you will foreclose." And then when I left there, then I was worried because I thought, oh my goodness, I've cussed out a banker, that he's going to wind up calling my boss, and my boss is going to fire me. So luckily that didn't happen, thank goodness. But then I had to go to what they call a non-conformant lender. And non-conformant lender, basically they can charge anything they want to. But he looked at everything, and then he turns around and goes, "You sure you don't want to borrow a little bit more money here?" He said, "You can get some of that stuff subcontracted out and get in there a little faster." And of course my wife was excited about that. And so she looked at me and she said, "I think it'd be a good idea." And I thought, okay, to appease her. So I borrowed a little bit more, and I did subcontract out, quite a bit of stuff to get into the house faster. But as time went on and everything, I retired from that company, took early retirement, and started my own business and everything. And and it was a rough road to hoe to get started on it. But nevertheless, I tried and I tried and I tried, and the house almost went into foreclosure, and I got a customer to sign a service contract with me, and I pulled it out of foreclosure. And of course, didn't look back from there. Well, the house was built back, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember what the date was on the building permit. It was 94, if I remember correctly. It was back when I built the house. But anyway, it's to the point now with, remember back when the economy took a tank, then my customers wasn't buying anything. And then some of the big banks came in and started buying out some of the smaller banks that I catered to, so I lost business there. And, and of course, I love doing what I'm doing, or I wouldn't have done it as many years as I have. But all in all, I've lost some customers, and my wife's had health issues and back and spine surgeries, and she's disabled now and can't work. So basically I do it all. But, I'm to the point now that I'm getting ready to lose my home, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And I know most of you people will say, well, just sell it and get you something smaller that you can afford. But I want to tell you, if you've never had a lifelong dream and a desire and the motivation to design and to build your own house that took 2.5 years to build, and your heart and soul is in it. I mean, as mortgage companies call it, pride and ownership, you bet your dollar there's pride and ownership. Because I know where every nail, every piece of 2x4 or whatever is in this house, every bit of the wiring from A to Z. And it's a personal accomplishment to do something like that. The pride in doing that. And, basically my 10-year plan for the business, I did not foresee, big banks buying out the small one, losing business, health issues cropping up, with my knees are shot now from years bending down, working on ATMs, drive-up equipment, tube systems, everything like that. I can't afford to get my knees operated on because I'll be out of work quite a while for recuperation. And then if a customer calls in for a service call, and I say, and I would greatly appreciate it. But like I say, guys, I don't want to lose this. This house means everything to me. And my plan was to get it paid for before I die. And so that when I do die, that my 3 kids, could sell the house, divide the money up, and I would be able to leave them something other than my debt. But, I appreciate very much you taking your time to watch this. And I'm probably going to quit before the bugs wind up eating me up. But thank you very much. Again, my name is Randall. And to send me an email is... Thank you. Oh, well, hey, wait a minute. To give you a little view of what I did with the house that I built, this is my house. There's a little scan around here. I took 3 different house plans, like I said, and put them together and built this house. I'm very proud of it. Did masonry work. Each one of the little rails were cut, and that took forever to do. But that's my home. And thank you for watching.